My daughter called me dead weight in front of the great-grandkids. When the will was read, she nearly fainted. Your presence here means so much to me. Watch until the end and leave a comment telling me which city you're watching from. I want to see how far my story has reached. I'm Teresa, and I'm 61 years old. I never thought those words would cut so deep, especially coming from my own daughter's mouth. Mom, you're such a dead weight. Stop pretending you can help us. Miranda's voice sliced through the Sunday afternoon chatter like a knife. The words hung in the air of her pristine dining room, where crystal glasses caught the light and everything screamed expensive taste. My great-grandchildren, ages 6 and 8, stopped coloring at the kids' table. Little Emma looked up with those big brown eyes, confusion written all over her face. I had just offered to help pay for their private school tuition. The conversation had started innocently enough. Miranda mentioning how tight money was getting with the kids' education costs. I thought finally here was something I could contribute to. Something that mattered. I could help with the school fees, I had said quietly, reaching for my purse. I have some money saved up. That's when Miranda exploded. Dead weight. The words echoed in my head as I sat frozen in that expensive dining chair, my hand still halfway to my purse. Around the table, the silence was deafening. My son-in-law Richard shifted uncomfortably, suddenly very interested in his roast beef. Miranda's face was flushed with anger, her perfectly manicured fingers gripping her wine glass. You live in that tiny house with your social security check, she continued, her voice getting louder. You drive a 15-year-old Honda. What money could you possibly have? Stop embarrassing yourself. I felt heat creep up my neck. The great-grandchildren were staring now, their coloring forgotten. Little Jake, barely 6, looked like he might cry. I wanted to disappear into the floor. Miranda, that's enough, Richard finally mumbled, but his voice carried no real authority. He never stood up to his wife, especially not for me. Miranda laughed, that cruel sound I'd grown to recognize over the years. Oh please, Richard. Someone needs to tell her the truth. Mom, you've been living in your own little fantasy world where you think you're helpful. But you're not. You're just here, taking up space. I stood up slowly, my legs shaking. The beautiful dining room felt like it was closing in on me. The chandelier overhead seemed too bright, the walls too close. I could feel everyone's eyes on me. Miranda's triumphant, Richard's guilty, the children's confused. I should go, I whispered. Yes, you should, Miranda said, not even looking at me. She was already reaching for her wine again, dismissing me like I was nothing. I gathered my purse and walked to the front door on unsteady legs. Nobody followed me. Nobody said goodbye. As I reached for the door handle, I heard Miranda's voice drifting from the dining room. Kids, finish your coloring. Grandma Teresa just gets confused sometimes. Confused. Dead weight. The words followed me to my car. I sat in the driver's seat for a long time before starting the engine. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely grip the steering wheel. 43 years I'd been Miranda's mother. 43 years of trying to be enough, trying to help, trying to be the grandmother I thought they wanted. But I was just dead weight. The drive back to my tiny house felt endless. Every red light gave me more time to replay Miranda's words, to see the look of contempt on her face. When I finally pulled into my driveway, I sat there staring at my modest 2-bedroom home. The paint was a little faded, sure. The garden needed work. But it was mine and it was paid for. Inside, I made myself a cup of tea with trembling hands. The silence felt different now. Before today, it had been peaceful. Now it felt empty. Lonely. Like I was truly just taking up space, even in my own home. I walked to my bedroom and opened the bottom drawer of my dresser. Underneath my winter sweaters was a small metal box. Inside that box were documents Miranda had never seen. Bank statements, property deeds, investment portfolios. For the first time in hours, I almost smiled. Dead weight. If Miranda only knew. People see what they want to see. Miranda had decided long ago that I was poor, simple, and dependent. It was easier for her that way. I'd been keeping secrets for over 30 years. It started with Harold, my late husband. He died 10 years ago. But what Miranda never knew was that Harold hadn't just been a maintenance supervisor at the local college. He'd been smart with money, quietly buying small rental properties around town whenever we could scrape together a down payment. While other couples were buying new cars and taking fancy vacations, we were investing. "Teresa," he used to say, "rich people don't look rich. They look comfortable." We looked comfortable. Miranda saw this as failure. After Harold passed, I inherited everything. 3 rental properties, all paid off. A modest investment portfolio he'd built over decades. And life insurance money that I'd never touched. I kept working my secretary job at the insurance office, living off that income while the rental money went straight into savings. I drove my old Honda because it ran perfectly. I lived in our small house because it held Harold's memory. Miranda saw struggle where there was strategy. The worst part was watching her marriage to Richard. She'd met him during her nursing program, but the moment she realized he was going to be a doctor, everything changed. She dropped out of school, focused entirely on being the perfect doctor's wife. Designer clothes, charity luncheons, the big house in Riverside Estates. "Mom, you should see Richard's practice," she told me years ago. "He's going to make so much money. We'll never have to worry about anything." But I could see the cracks even then. The way Richard worked 18-hour days. The way Miranda's smile looked painted on at family gatherings. The way they fought about money when they thought no one was listening. I tried to be supportive. I babysat the kids when they were little, never asking for payment. I brought casseroles when Miranda was too busy with her social obligations to cook. I attended every school play, every soccer game, every event where the parents were too busy to show up. "You don't understand the pressure we're under," Miranda would say whenever I offered to help with anything substantial. "This isn't your world, Mom." She was right about that. My world was quiet, private. The day everything changed was 3 years ago during Christmas dinner. Miranda had been complaining about the cost of the kids' activities. Gymnastics, piano lessons, soccer league fees. I'd offered to help. "With what money, Mom?" she'd laughed. "Your secretary's salary barely covers your own expenses." That's when I realized she truly believed I was barely getting by. She thought I was living paycheck to paycheck, struggling to maintain my little house, too proud to ask for help. The sad old woman whose husband had left her nothing but memories. I'd let her believe it because it was easier than explaining why I chose to live simply. Why I drove an old car, shopped at discount stores, clipped coupons. Why I worked a job I could have quit years ago. The truth was, I liked my simple life. I liked my co-workers at the insurance office. I liked knowing every neighbor on my street. I liked the quiet evenings in my small living room, reading books Harold had loved. I liked being invisible. But invisible meant powerless in Miranda's world. After that Christmas dinner, something shifted between us. She stopped asking me to babysit as often. Stopped inviting me to family events. When she did include me, it felt like charity. Like she was doing me a favor by letting me participate in their successful lives. The great-grandchildren barely knew me. Emma and Jake were polite when they saw me, but distant. They lived in a world of private schools and ski trips and summer camps. I was just Grandma Teresa who brought homemade cookies and hugged them a little too long. Miranda made sure they understood the hierarchy. Daddy worked hard to give them nice things. Mommy managed their busy social calendar. Grandma Teresa was just someone who showed up sometimes with small gifts they didn't really need. I stopped trying to explain myself years ago. What was the point? Miranda had created a narrative where she was the successful daughter who'd risen above her humble beginnings, and I was the simple mother who'd never amounted to much. It worked for her. But sitting in my kitchen the night after she called me dead weight, looking at the financial statements spread across my table, I realized something had fundamentally changed. I was tired of being invisible. The rental properties alone brought in $4,800 a month. My investment portfolio had grown to over $800,000. The life insurance money sat untouched in a high-yield savings account. I owned my house outright, had no debt, and more money than Miranda could imagine. I'd been playing poor for so long, I'd forgotten I had choices. Tomorrow I was gonna make some calls. I called Robert Matthews on Monday morning. He'd been Harold's lawyer for 20 years, and mine for the 10 years since Harold passed. A quiet man with silver hair and kind eyes. He'd always respected my privacy about financial matters. "Teresa," he said when I walked into his office downtown. "It's good to see you. How can I help?" I sat across from his mahogany desk, my hands folded in my lap. "I want to change my will." Robert nodded, pulling out a legal pad. "Course. What changes would you like to make?" "I want to leave everything to charity, except for $5,000 to Miranda." His pen stopped moving. He looked up at me, his expression carefully neutral. "Teresa, your current will leaves everything to Miranda. That's approximately $2.3 million in assets. Are you sure about this change?" $2.3 million. Hearing the number out loud still surprised me sometimes. Harold and I had lived so modestly for so long, it was hard to believe we'd accumulated so much. "I'm sure," I said quietly. Robert set down his pen. "May I ask what prompted this decision?" I stared out his office window at the busy street below. "How do you explain 43 years of feeling invisible? How do you describe the moment when your own daughter calls you dead weight in front of your great-grandchildren?" "She told me I'm dead weight," I said finally. "In front of the children. She said I should stop pretending I can help anyone, that I'm just taking up space." Robert's expression softened. "I'm sorry, Teresa. That must have been very painful." "It was honest," I replied. "Miranda sees me as a burden. She's made that clear for years. I think it's time I stopped burdening her with an inheritance she doesn't think I'm capable of having." We spent the next hour going over the details. I wanted to establish a foundation for elderly people who'd been abandoned by their families. People like me, who'd become invisible to the ones who should love them most. The irony wasn't lost on me. I was using Miranda's rejection to help others who'd been rejected. "The foundation will be called the Harold and Teresa Morrison Foundation," I told Robert. "For seniors who need support when their families won't provide it." Robert made notes, his pen scratching across the legal pad. "What about the $5,000 to Miranda?" "She can use it however she wants," I said. "It's enough to show I didn't forget her, but not enough to make her feel guilty about how she treated me." Actually, that wasn't true. I hoped it would make her feel guilty. I hoped it would eat at her for the rest of her life. After the lawyer's office, I drove to the bank. Sarah, my financial advisor, was a woman about Miranda's age who'd always treated me with respect, even when I wore my discount store clothes and carried my worn purse. "Mrs. Morrison," she said, greeting me with a genuine smile. "How are you today?" "I'm making some changes, Sarah. I want to set up a charitable foundation." We spent 2 hours going over my assets. The rental properties were worth approximately $900,000. My investment portfolio had grown to $850,000. The life insurance money, untouched for a decade, had earned interest and sat at $420,000. My house was worth about $130,000. "You've done very well," Sarah said, reviewing the numbers. "Harold would be proud of how you've managed everything." I smiled sadly. Harold would have been proud. He'd also have been heartbroken to know how Miranda treated me. He'd always believed family was everything. "There's one more thing," I said to Sarah. "I don't want anyone to know about this foundation until after I'm gone. Can you help me set it up quietly?" "Course. We can establish it as a private foundation with instructions that it only becomes active upon your death. Everything will remain confidential until then." Driving home, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. Control. For the first time since Harold died, I was making decisions that mattered. Not just paying bills and managing properties, but actively shaping what would happen after I was gone. Miranda thought I was dead weight. Soon, she'd learn exactly how much this dead weight was worth. That evening, I sat in Harold's old recliner, looking through photo albums. Pictures of Miranda as a little girl, laughing on my lap. Her high school graduation, where she'd hugged me tight and thanked me for all my sacrifices. Her wedding day, when she'd whispered that she hoped to be half the woman I was. When had it all changed? When had I become the embarrassment instead of the mother she was proud of? I think it started when she married Richard. Suddenly, my small house wasn't charming anymore. It was inadequate. My simple clothes weren't practical, they were shameful. My quiet life wasn't peaceful, it was pathetic. Tried to adapt. I'd bought nicer clothes for family gatherings, even though they sat in my closet unworn most of the year. I'd offered to help with expenses, thinking maybe financial contribution would earn me respect. I'd stayed quiet when Miranda made cutting remarks about my lifestyle. But it was never enough. I was never enough. Well, now I was done trying to be enough for someone who would never see my worth. The foundation would help people like Mrs. Chen, who lived 2 streets over and never saw her successful children. Like Mr. Rodriguez, whose family had put him in a nursing home and never visited. Like me, who had spent 10 years being treated like a burden by the daughter I'd raised and loved. I closed the photo album and walked to my bedroom. In the bottom drawer, under the winter sweaters, I put the legal documents Robert had prepared. My new will. The foundation papers. All the proof of a life Miranda had never bothered to understand. Dead weight, she'd called me. Soon she'd learn that even dead weight can shift the balance of everything. The phone call came on a Thursday evening in March. I was washing dishes when Miranda's number appeared on my caller ID. "Mom, I need to ask you a favor." No hello. No how are you. Just straight to what she needed. "What is it, Miranda?" "Richard's medical conference is in Hawaii this year, and we're thinking of taking the kids. Making it a family vacation. But the flights and hotel for 4 people. It's expensive." I dried my hands slowly, already knowing where this was heading. "How much do you need? Could you loan us $8,000? We'll pay you back when Richard's bonus comes through." $1,000. For a vacation to Hawaii. While she called me dead weight for offering to help with school tuition. "I can't do that, Miranda." Silence on the other end of the line. Then her voice, sharp with disbelief. "What do you mean you can't?" "I mean I won't. That's a lot of money for a vacation." "It's not just a vacation, Mom. It's important for Richard's career. Networking, making connections. You wouldn't understand." There it was again. The dismissal. The assumption that I was too simple to understand their complicated lives. "I understand perfectly," I said quietly. "I just can't help you." Miranda's voice turned cold. "Can't or won't? Does it matter?" The line went quiet for so long I thought she'd hung up. When she spoke again, her tone was venomous. "You know what, Mom? Don't worry about it. I should have known better than to ask you for anything important. You've always been selfish." Selfish. The word hit me like a slap. 43 years of putting her first, and I was selfish for refusing to fund their Hawaiian vacation. "Miranda, that's not fair." "Fair?" She laughed, that cruel sound I'd grown to hate. "What's not fair is having a mother who pretends to care but never actually helps when it matters. What's not fair is explaining to my children why Grandma Teresa is so stingy." The line went dead. That weekend I drove to Emma's soccer game. I'd been going to every game this season, cheering from the sidelines, bringing orange slices for halftime. But when I approached the field, Miranda intercepted me. "What are you doing here?" "I came to watch Emma play." Miranda crossed her arms, blocking my path to the bleachers. "I think it's better if you don't come to the games anymore." "Why?" "The kids have been asking questions. About why you won't help our family. About why you're so difficult. It's confusing for them." I stared at my daughter, this woman I'd raised, who was now standing between me and my great-grandchildren like a guard dog. "What did you tell them?" "The truth. That sometimes adults make selfish choices, and we have to accept that some people aren't as generous as others." My heart broke a little more. She was poisoning those children against me, teaching them that their great-grandmother was the villain in their family story. Miranda, please. They're my great-grandchildren too. And I'm their mother. I decide what's best for them. She leaned closer, her voice dropping to a whisper. Stay away from my children, Mom. I mean it. I stood there watching her walk away, her perfect blonde hair catching the sunlight, her designer workout clothes marking her as someone important, someone who belonged. Not like me in my discount store jeans and old cardigan. The next month, I wasn't invited to Jake's birthday party. When I called to ask about it, Miranda was brief. It was just immediate family, Mom. Small gathering. But I saw the photos on Facebook later. 20 people at least, including neighbors and Richard's colleagues. Immediate family, apparently, didn't include me. Easter came and went without an invitation. Mother's Day passed in silence. When I tried calling, Miranda's responses were polite but cold. The great-grandchildren were always busy when I asked to see them. I was being erased from their lives, one rejection at a time. The cruelest cut came in July. I ran into Miranda at the grocery store, and for a moment, her face lit up like the old days. Mom, how are you? I'm fine, dear. How are Emma and Jake? They're wonderful. Growing so fast. Then her expression shifted, became calculating. Actually, I'm glad I ran into you. I wanted to talk to you about something. Hope fluttered in my chest. Maybe she was ready to reconcile. The kids have been asking about their inheritance. The hope died instantly. They're so young to be thinking about that, I said carefully. Miranda shrugged. Richard and I believe in being honest about family finances. We've explained that someday they'll inherit your house and whatever savings you have. It helps them understand the value of money. I stared at her, speechless. She was already spending my money in her mind, already dividing up my possessions with children who barely knew me anymore. Of course, we know it won't be much, she continued, adjusting her designer purse strap. But every little bit helps with college funds, right? Every little bit. $2.3 million was every little bit to her. Miranda, I said slowly, you shouldn't make assumptions about what I have or don't have. She laughed, that sound I'd learned to dread. Oh, Mom, you don't have to pretend with me. I know what a secretary's salary looks like. I know what Dad left you. It's okay that it's not much. We don't expect miracles. She patted my arm condescendingly, like I was a child who needed reassurance. The important thing is that the kids know their great-grandmother thought of them. Even if it's just a few $1,000s and that little house. That night I called Robert Matthews again. I want to add a codicil to my will, I told him. Something that explains my decision. Something Miranda will read when the time comes. What would you like it to say? I thought for a moment, choosing my words carefully. I want her to know that I heard everything she said. Every cruel word, every dismissal, every time she made me feel worthless. I want her to understand that deadweight can still make choices. Robert was quiet for a moment. Teresa, are you sure about this? There's still time to reconcile with Miranda. I looked around my small, quiet house. My sanctuary that Miranda found so embarrassing. My simple life that she thought was pathetic. She made her choice, Robert. Now I'm making mine. The chest pain started on a Tuesday morning while I was watering my tomatoes. Sharp, radiating down my left arm, stealing my breath. I dropped the watering can and gripped the porch railing, waiting for it to pass. Didn't. Mrs. Patterson from next door found me 20 minutes later, sitting on my front steps, unable to catch my breath. She called 911 without asking, bless her heart. The paramedics were kind, professional, asking questions I answered through gritted teeth. Do you have family we should call? One of them asked as they loaded me into the ambulance. I gave them Miranda's number because there was no one else. At the hospital, everything moved in a blur of tests and monitors and doctors with serious faces. Mild heart attack, they said. Stress-related. Nothing too serious if I took care of myself. Rest, medication, follow-up appointments. Miranda arrived 3 hours later. her face perfectly composed in that way she'd mastered years ago. Concerned enough to look like a good daughter, but not so emotional that she'd smudge her makeup. "Mom, thank goodness you're okay." She kissed my forehead, a quick, obligatory peck. "You scared us." As if Richard and the kids were sitting at home, worried sick about their grandmother. "I'm fine," I said. "Just need to rest. Course. We'll make sure you have everything you need." She sat down in the visitor's chair, crossing her legs elegantly. "I've been thinking. Maybe it's time we talked about you moving somewhere more suitable." "Suitable? You're 61, Mom. Living alone in that house, no one to check on you. What if this had happened at night? What if Mrs. Patterson hadn't found you?" I studied my daughter's face. She looked genuinely concerned, but I could see the calculation behind her eyes. The same look she'd had when she was 10 and trying to convince me to let her have a sleepover on a school night. "What are you suggesting?" "There's a lovely assisted living community near us. Garden views, activities, nurses on staff. You'd be so much safer there." Assisted living. At 61, after a mild heart attack that the doctor said was completely manageable with medication and lifestyle changes. "I'm not ready for assisted living, Miranda." "Mom, be practical. You can't live alone anymore. And honestly, maintaining that house at your age, it's too much." My house. The one she thought would be part of her inheritance someday. "The house is fine. I'm fine." Miranda sighed, that long-suffering sound she made when I was being difficult. "We'll talk about it later. You need to focus on getting better right now." She stayed for an hour making small talk, checking her phone frequently. When the nurse came in to check my vitals, Miranda stepped into the hallway to take a call. I could hear her voice through the thin door. "Yes, Richard, she's okay. Minor heart attack. Well, at least now we can talk about her living situation without seeming pushy." My blood went cold. I know. But think about it. If something serious had happened, we'd inherit that little house and whatever savings she has. At least this way we can help her transition somewhere safer and maybe, I don't know, help her organize her finances. Another pause. Then her voice dropped lower, more conspiratorial. "She's been so secretive about money lately. Did you know she refused to loan us money for Hawaii? I think she might be hiding how bad her situation really is. Pride, you know. This could be the perfect time to step in and help her make better decisions." I closed my eyes, feeling something inside me harden into steel. Even my heart attack was an opportunity for Miranda to manage my life, to access whatever she thought I might have hidden away. When she came back into the room, her face was all concern again. "That was Richard. He sends his love. He said to tell you not to worry about anything, that we'll take care of everything." How thoughtful. The next morning, Miranda returned with a stack of brochures for assisted living facilities. She spread them across my hospital bed like we were planning a vacation. "Look at this one, Mom. Sunset Manor. They have bridge tournaments and gardening clubs. You'd love it." I flipped through the glossy pages. Smiling elderly people playing cards, tending flowers, eating in communal dining rooms. Everyone looked so happy to have given up their independence. "The monthly fee is only $3,800, Miranda continued. "Very reasonable for the level of care. $3,800 a month. Nearly $46,000 a year. More than many people made in salary. That's a lot of money, Miranda. Mom, you can't put a price on safety and peace of mind. Besides, once you sell the house, you'll have enough to cover it for years." Once you sell the house. There it was. The real reason she wanted me in assisted living. What if I don't want to sell the house? Miranda's smile tightened slightly. "Well, you'd have to. You couldn't afford Sunset Manor on just Social Security. And you can't maintain 2 residences." She was right, of course. If I were really living on Social Security and the small savings she imagined I had, I'd have no choice but to sell everything and hope it lasted long enough to cover the assisted living fees. But I wasn't living on Social Security alone. "I need to think about it," I said. Miranda nodded. gathering up the brochures. Course. But don't think too long. These places have waiting lists. After she left, I lay in that hospital bed staring at the ceiling. The heart attack had been a warning, but not the kind the doctors thought. It was a warning that time was running out to make sure my affairs were truly in order. I called Robert Matthews from the hospital phone. "Robert, it's Teresa. I'm in the hospital, but I'm fine. I need you to do something for me." "Course. What do you need?" "I want to add something else to my will. Letter. Something that explains exactly why I made the choices I made." "Teresa. She thinks I'm hiding poverty, Robert. She thinks I'm too proud to admit I'm broke. She wants to put me in assisted living and sell my house to pay for it. She's already planning how to spend my inheritance, and she thinks it's a few $1,000s and a small house." Silence on the other end of the line. "Write this down," I said. "I want Miranda to know that I heard every word she said in that hospital hallway. I want her to know that I've been listening for years. And I want her to know that dead weight sometimes carries more than anyone realizes." The next week, I was released from the hospital with a clean bill of health and a new perspective on what really mattered. Miranda visited twice, both times bringing more assisted living brochures and growing more frustrated with my resistance to her plans. I was done being managed, done being dismissed, and done pretending I didn't know exactly what my daughter really thought of me. The foundation paperwork was complete. My will was updated. All that was left was time. I lived for 3 more years after that heart attack. 3 peaceful years in my small house, tending my garden, reading my books, visiting with Mrs. Patterson over coffee. Miranda's visits became less frequent as I continued to refuse assisted living, but she never stopped trying to manage my life from a distance. She'd call every few weeks with suggestions about home modifications, meal delivery services, medical alert systems. Always framed as concern, always carrying the underlying message that I was too old and foolish to take care of myself. I let her think she was helping. When pneumonia took me at 64, it was quick and relatively peaceful. I'd lived long enough to see Emma graduate high school and start college, long enough to watch Jake grow into a thoughtful young man who wrote me letters when his mother wasn't looking, long enough to know that my secret would soon become Miranda's reality. The will reading was scheduled for a Thursday afternoon in Robert Matthews' office. Miranda arrived 20 minutes early, dressed in a black suit that probably cost more than most people spent on groceries in a month. Richard came with her, looking uncomfortable in his expensive tie. Emma and Jake were there too, now young adults who'd grown up hearing their mother's version of their great-grandmother's story. The poor old woman who'd lived alone in a tiny house, too proud to accept help, too stubborn to be practical about her limitations. Robert settled behind his desk, the will spread before him like a map to buried treasure. Miranda sat straight-backed in her chair, hands folded, wearing the expression of someone prepared to graciously accept a burden. "Thank you all for coming," Robert began. "Teresa's will is straightforward, but there are some elements that may come as a surprise." Miranda nodded sympathetically. "Mom was always private about her finances. We understand there probably isn't much." Robert's expression was carefully neutral. "Let me read the relevant portions." He cleared his throat and began. "I, Teresa Morrison, being of sound mind and body, do hereby make this my last will and testament." Standard language, the kind Miranda had probably heard in legal dramas. She looked relaxed, patient. "To my daughter Miranda, I leave the sum of $5,000, to be used as she sees fit." Miranda blinked. $5,000. That's all. "Please let me continue," Robert said gently. "The remainder of my estate, valued at approximately $2.3 million, I leave to the Harold and Teresa Morrison Foundation, established for the support of elderly individuals who have been abandoned or rejected by their families." The silence in the room was deafening. Miranda's face went through several expressions in rapid succession. Confusion, disbelief, shock, and finally, something approaching panic. $2.3 million. Her voice was barely a whisper. "That's impossible." Robert continued reading. I have also included a personal letter to be read aloud as part of this proceeding." He pulled out a sealed envelope, opened it carefully, and began to read in my voice my words. "Miranda, if you are hearing this, then you have learned what I spent your entire adult life hiding from you. I was never the poor, simple woman you believed me to be. I chose to live modestly because that brought me peace, not because I had no other choice. For years you made it clear that you saw me as dead weight, as someone taking up space in your successful life. You were embarrassed by my small house, my old car, my simple clothes. You kept your children away from me because you thought I wasn't good enough for your family. When I offered to help with school tuition, you called me dead weight in front of Emma and Jake. When I couldn't loan you $8,000 for a vacation, you called me selfish. When I had a heart attack, you saw it as an opportunity to control my living situation and access what you thought were my meager savings. I heard you in the hospital hallway, Miranda. I heard you telling Richard that at least if something serious happened to me, you'd inherit my little house and whatever small savings I had. You were already planning how to manage my poverty. But I was never poor. I was never a burden. I was a woman who chose to live quietly while building something meaningful with the money your father and I accumulated over decades of careful planning. The Harold and Teresa Morrison Foundation will help elderly people who have been discarded by their families, just as you discarded me. People who have been made to feel worthless by the children they raised and loved. You taught me that family isn't about blood or obligation. It's about respect, kindness, and seeing the worth in people even when they don't live up to your expectations. You failed at all of those things. The $5,000 I'm leaving you is not an insult. It's enough to show that I didn't forget you, but not enough to reward the years of cruelty you showed me. I hope someday you understand the difference. Emma and Jake, if you're hearing this, know that your great-grandmother loved you deeply, even when your mother kept us apart. I hope you'll learn from this that treating people with kindness matters more than any inheritance ever could. Miranda, you spent years telling me I was dead weight. I hope you now understand that even dead weight can shift the balance of everything. With love for the daughter you could have been, and sadness for the woman you became, Teresa Morrison. The letter's words hung in the air like smoke. Miranda sat frozen, her face pale as paper. Richard stared at his hands. Emma had tears streaming down her cheeks, and Jake looked like someone had slapped him. "Mom." Emma's voice was small, broken. "Is this true? Did you really say those things to great-grandma?" Miranda opened her mouth but no sound came out. $2.3 million, Richard said finally, his voice hollow. All this time she had $2.3 million. "And now it's gone," Miranda whispered. "It's all gone." Robert cleared his throat. "There is one more thing. Teresa left specific instructions that if anyone contests this will, the $5,000 bequest will be revoked entirely." Miranda looked up at him, her eyes wild. "She planned this. She planned all of this." "Yes," Robert said simply. "She did." As they filed out of the office, Emma stopped beside her mother's chair. "All those times you said great-grandma couldn't help us, that she was poor. You were wrong about everything, weren't you?" Miranda didn't answer. She couldn't. The truth was too big, too devastating, too complete. Jake paused in the doorway, looking back at his mother. "She tried to give us money for school once, didn't she? And you called her dead weight." The door closed behind them with a soft click, leaving Miranda alone with the weight of what she'd lost. Not just the money, but the knowledge that she'd thrown away the love of a woman who'd been worth far more than she'd ever imagined. In the end, Teresa Morrison had taught her daughter the most expensive lesson of her life, that some words can never be taken back, and some choices can never be undone. The dead weight had shifted everything, just as she'd promised.